Your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
Let me tell you, they hate Jews. Let me tell you, they also hate Australia.
Yeah.
They burn our flag, but they'll burn your flag, and they'll burn you.
Yeah.
So understand that they're against our common. And I say now to the Australian government, damn it, wake up. You don't need any more warnings. You've already received enough.
Following this, he is an actor, and he is a talented actor without any irony. And we saw his movies in his time. There's nothing unusual. I think that things look quite different now, but that's not the point. The sign is about 1 kilometer away from town. But why do you film yourself in front of the sign? Why are you standing outside the house? Just enter the house if the house is yours. Theft is not the great definition for this. Theft is a secret theft of the assets. Here it's done in the open, so it's burglary. Why are they not managing to perpetrate this burglary? Because the consequences are very serious for the burglars. Now I think they're counting on the midterm elections, and they hope that the situation will change in the US, and their traditional allies will come back to power, and they will continue their pressure on President. Is there also a question about the blockade of Kaliningrad region? I hope that this is not going to happen. If there are any threats of such nature, these threats will be destroyed. And everyone has to understand. And everyone has to take account of this, that such actions will just lead to unseen escalation of the conflict. And it will bring this conflict to a new level and will expand it to a large-scale international conflict. Everyone has to understand it. How are you aiming NATO at the war with Russia when the main founder of NATO is not believing Russia to be did and will continue to do everything to support the mood of young people to create families as early as possible and have children. But this is a very subtle process. Of course, everyone knows that young people and a woman wants to get an education first and then raise the level of education, maybe take some steps in her career, and then around 30 they have the first child, and then maybe sometimes they don't have energy for the second child. And of course, that needs to become fashionable again. People should understand what happiness is, happiness of fatherhood or motherhood. They want to prepare for a war with Russia. Can you read? Can you even read? Read the new strategy of the national strategy of security strategy of the US. The key player, the US, is the key sponsor of NATO. All main financing is coming from US. Money and technology, military technology, and the ammunition and military equipment. That's the basis. In the new strategy of national security of the United States, Russia is not mentioned as the enemy, as the goal, as the target. And the General Secretary of NATO is preparing for a war with us. What is this? Can you even read?
Welcome back to the SCIF. Can you even read, says Putin. He's talking about the national security strategy just issued by President Trump, which doesn't call Russia the enemy, where NATO is planning and preparing and wants a massive global destructive war, possibly nuclear, with the Russian Federation. What is going on here? Well, it's part of a bigger scenario that you need to be aware of. There's a few other data points today that point to this scenario. Just as we daily tell you what's going on in the world, I want you to pay attention to some of this. You saw in the cold open there. Let me play that again. I'm going to bring this video up one more time so you can see what I'm talking about here. Here we go. So I'm going to play this again. So where is that? That is in Armenia. CDM, I was there with the team this summer at Etchmiadzin, the Holy See of the Armenian Apostolic Church, the first Christian cathedral ever built in early 300s. I think 313 it was finished. 1700 years old, the church in Armenia, the Apostolic Church. Apostolic means it was built by the apostles. Bartholomew helped build that congregation in the beginning before Armenia became a Christian, the first Christian country. The spear that stuck Christ in the side on the cross is at that church. Pieces of the cross are at that church. This is the globalist government of Nikol Pashinyan attempting to storm the church, destroy the organization of the Apostolic Church, and make it a state-sponsored church, just like the Chinese Communist Party. Think about that for a minute. There's not a word out of the Trump administration about this. There is a trip, the Trump route for international peace and prosperity between Turkey and Azerbaijan, two Muslim countries. Nothing about the Christians. There are Christian political prisoners in Baku and Azerbaijan from the war, where they ethnically cleansed Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh, the ancient Christian area, leveled hundreds of churches in the area, moved 100,000 Christians out of there. Now it's a Muslim territory, and we're making deals with them. Think about that. No word about the first Christian church ever built being overrun by globalist forces in Yerevan, outside of Yerevan, the capital of Armenia. Armenia, where the Christian genocide, 2 million Christians were murdered by the neighboring Turks 100 years ago. This is an ongoing problem, not just in Armenia, in Ukraine, in Romania, in Beirut, in Lebanon, in the US, in Western Europe. This is what all of this is about. This is why they want a global war in Europe, to finish off Western Christianity. Let me bring up another data point. This is from Tom Barrack, the Trump envoy to Lebanon. Thank you, President of the United States and Congress for repealing the Caesar Act. Syria rises. Give Syria a chance. Now it is weaving a Damascus rug, the horizontal threads, every constituency, Sunni, Shia, Kurd, Druze, Alawite, diaspora. Running left and right alive with ancient durable colors. Let me read that again. Every constituency, Sunni, Shia, Kurd, Druze, Alawite, and the diaspora. What's missing? Do you see it yet? Did he mention the Christians in Syria? Maybe because there's none left, because of U.S. policy drove them all out. Same with Iraq. Same in Lebanon, which is happening right now. So we're going to continue to maintain the pressure in trying to get the word into the administration that you have to start talking about the Christian communities in Lebanon. You have to start talking about the Christian communities in Armenia. This is absurd. You have Vladimir Putin giving his annual address there, talking about Zelensky, saying if you want to go to the sign of Krasnoyarsk or Kupiansk or one of the two outside, you went to the sign a kilometer away from the city, but go into the city if it's yours. He says Europe, NATO is pushing for war. All of this is of a piece. I want to say hello to the crew in the chat. Thank you for the engagement. Really appreciate it. We're going to go about a minute 20 or an hour 20 today on the show. Fantastic show coming up. At the second segment, I've got Colonel Chris Wyatt, who's coming on, who's a heck of a guy, talking about another situation in South Africa against the Christians. Check out whatfinger.com. They post a lot of our content. We're on podcast, any podcast provider. You can listen to the show. We're on Gettr, X. We're on YouTube. We load after the show, and we're on Rumble. We're on multiple X channels. You can find the show anywhere. If one channel's down, find us somewhere else. We'll be right back on the SCIF. Stay with us. We got a hell of a show coming up. Be right back.
Celebrate our newest launch, Rev 7. I'm bringing you an amazing introductory offer, plus an exclusive overstock sale that you're not going to want to miss. Rev 7 is our premium energy drink that tastes great and gives you energy all day with no jitters and no crashes. That's because there's no sugar and no caffeine. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7 that for a limited time you can try our 3-pack absolutely free. Or check out our Percale bed sheets. I can't believe I'm even going to say this. Every color, every style, every size, only $29.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% on our Rev 7 12-packs or try our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. And our Percale bed sheets, all sizes, only $29.88, even the queens and kings. Inventory is extremely limited, so order now.
Pandemic, we can never be caught unprepared again. And so many Americans, when COVID hit, they had nothing in the house. Stores were shut down, and doctors' offices were shut down, and even if doctors prescribed drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, pharmacists wouldn't fill the prescriptions. That was a nightmare.
Now the situation is much worse. We have these horrible supply chain problems. In our emergency medical kit at the Wellness Company, we have 8 prescription drugs that are all potentially life-saving.
Most people who died with COVID, they died in the hospital because they didn't receive early treatment.
Every American family should have one of these.
I can tell you the Wellness Company kit is the answer.
When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, we'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah, all the men will cheer, the boys will shout, the ladies they will all turn out and belong.
Well, I'm waiting for Colonel Chris Wyatt is going to come on. Colonel Wyatt is a very knowledgeable man on Africa and on the whole region, U.S. Army intelligence officer, and extremely knowledgeable on all of this. So he's hopefully going to come on soon. I'm waiting for him. I sent him a text, but we'll just roll with it. So let's talk about a few stories here. Kushner's withdrawal from Belgrade mega project, a major lost opportunity for Serbia's capital. This is on our Balkan newspaper, the Balkan.press, which is becoming very, very impactful. Let me bring that up so you can see it. If you're interested in the region, it's a very historic, impactful region. A lot going on there. Has been started major wars in this area, and it's on fire again. And we have people all over there. So we're bringing you intel here. You're not going to see this story anywhere else, but the NATO bombing of Serbia in the 90s destroyed many buildings in Belgrade, the capital. I was just there, and one of them was going to be turned into a massive project, a retail and commercial project by the Trump organization, I should say Kushner. I'm not specific on the actual company that was doing it, but Kushner was heavily involved, but he's recently withdrawn. This is a blow to the country. We're not really sure why. We're going to investigate it. And our people, Botko, is all over this. He's one of our best writers at the Balkan.press in the region, on the ground. And we're going to have a lot more to say about all this and what's going on in the area, because it's really a tinderbox between Serbia and Kosovo, again, because of what's going on in Montenegro, the whole Ukraine thing, just a lot happening. Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, the history is all there. So the Balkan.press is a big one. So check that out. Let's look at another story that you need to be aware of. And this one I talked about a little bit in the cold open, but the EU funds Ukraine war for 2 more years and is collateralizing Russian assets, frozen assets, to do that, about 200 or 300 billion in assets that were in European banks of Russian citizens, corporations, governments, and they are frozen. Viktor Orban is coming out and say, if you take these assets, there's going to be a war within 3 months with Russia. So maybe that's the goal here, is to fund the Ukraine war with Russian assets so it can't be used for reconstruction that Trump wanted. And maybe it's a tripwire into a war. Another reason why we don't need American forces on the ground giving intelligence, air support, anything to the Ukraine conflict, because this is going to draw us into a global war, my friends, that is going to be disastrous, devastating, could be nuclear. And if your parents are there, if your children are in the military, it's going to be your family. So, and it's going to come here. Don't think that this war won't come here. This is a global war that the cabal wants in order to continue to destroy Western civilization and Christianity in Western Europe. This is obviously what it's about. Orban is not in that vein, along with Slovakia and Poland. They are not in that vein for the war, but Poland is run by the Tusk government now, and it's a little bit scary as to kind of the globalist shift that's happening on Poland. I was there 2 years ago saying this exactly. So very much need to watch this situation, and we'll stay on it. I see Colonel Wyatt in the green room now. I think I'm going to bring him in, and let's see what's going on. Sir, thank you for coming on the show. Really appreciate it this morning.
My pleasure. Sorry for the delay there. Little technical issues here. I've had trouble with my service provider, and we're still ironing that out, but I'm here.
No worries. Thank you for joining. We're produced on the fly here, man. It's all good. So tell us about yourself. I know Brindy Wells said you're the guy on Africa, and so you're a former intelligence officer of the U.S. Army, correct?
I am. I'm a 36-and-a-half-year veteran of the U.S. Army, 34 of that on active duty, 2 in the Ohio National Guard. I was an enlisted soldier as a signal soldier during the Cold War in Germany in the 80s. Then I went back to university, was air defense. After that, I came back as an intelligence officer. While serving as an intelligence officer, I was a tactical intelligence officer, counterintelligence agent, signals intelligence officer, strategic intelligence officer, and also a foreign area officer for sub-Saharan Africa. I did 23 of my 36 years overseas, multiple combat tours. I led a $3 billion program at the National Security Agency with a global workforce of about 10,000 people. I wrote for the President of the United States as an intelligence analyst at the Defense Intelligence Agency, including one presidential daily brief that kept about 640,000 Africans from starving to death, which was kind of cool. I served 3 tours in Germany, 1 in Italy. In Africa, I was stationed in Tunisia, Liberia, Botswana, Malawi, Nigeria, Mauritania, Uganda, and Ethiopia. I'm a published author in academic circles with Stellenbosch University in South Africa, with U.S. Army War College Strategic Studies Institute. I write for professional journals, and I've taught undergraduate at Iowa State, postgraduate at the Army War College. That's the Reader's Digest condensed version. I speak 6 languages.
So you know what you're talking about in Africa. Let's just leave it at that.
Rumor has it.
So we talk a lot about what's going on, the global war against Christianity and against Western civilization in general, whether it's in South Africa or in the Middle East or whatever, the Levant. What is we've had a lot of South African guests on from Brindy Wells and her network, and we've covered what's going on against the white population there. But give us an idea of what happened recently with this diplomatic. What do you want to call it? A raid? What happened?
Raid is certainly a good term for it. It definitely was a raid, but the whole situation is more like an imbroglio. So, yeah. So what's happened here is that earlier this year, President Ramaphosa of South Africa signed a piece of legislation and law which is unconstitutional. It's called the Expropriation Without Compensation Act. Now, that law allows the government at national, provincial, state, provincial, or local level to decide that your land, your property, not just land, it could be your cars or your apartments or your savings, that your property needs to be expropriated in the public interest without compensation. And the reason this is unconstitutional is under their constitution, section 25 allows for essentially what we have called eminent domain here. The government can take your property if it's needed in the public interest, but they have to compensate you justly and fairly. Well, they don't want to do that because they spent the last 31 years stealing, the government has, and they don't want to pay people for their property. So what better way to do it than pass a law? But the law is incongruent with the Constitution. That law, any law signed in South Africa, within the first 30 days, if 1/3 of the members of parliament disagree with it, it's a pretty interesting aspect, they can sign a petition, send that to the Constitutional Court, in other words, the Supreme Court, and have it reviewed within 30 days, guaranteed for constitutionality. I wish we had something like that, but anyway, they actually have that. It's never really been tried, to my knowledge. But President Ramaphosa went to Davos and signed this bill in front of the cameras, going, "Aha, redress, we're going to fix the imbalances here." And it was 34 days after he'd actually already signed it into law, so nobody in Parliament could actually refute it. So he's already skirted the law to create an unconstitutional law. When that happened, President Trump came in office shortly after that. He's like, "No, I don't think so. We're giving this country $500 million a year in foreign aid. We've given them $8.1 billion in assistance to fight HIV over the past 22 years. And we've given them duty-free access to our market while they impose 75% tariffs on our poultry. They ban our pork products. They limit the number of cars we can send there, and they're allowed to send whatever they want here. There's something wrong with this relationship." So Trump said, "You know what? No more foreign aid. We're done. We're not giving money to states that abrogate the rule of law." And of course, they turned it into Trump doesn't understand, then he's a racist, and all this other stuff. They try to blame Trump and the Trump administration because it plays to a popular base in South Africa. But the reality here is that it's a problem that just won't go away because, that won't go away because of their actions. Now, let me jump forward to what just happened. After President Trump did that, he also signed an executive order offering refugee status, in-country refugee status, which is unusual, but not unprecedented, to South Africans. Now, the program is explicitly for Afrikaners, those of European descent or mixed European descent, but it also clearly states on the US Embassy website, since the 10th of February, which he announced it on Friday night, the 7th, but on the 10th, the embassy put up on the website, and it's remained there, racial minorities. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that other races have come over under this program. Indians of South Asian descent, coloreds of mixed race descent, and also a few black South Africans who are married to whites or Indians because they're also being persecuted. So this has nothing to do with the white genocide. Unfortunately, President Trump, answering reporters' questions, used the term white genocide. He's thrown it out there a few times. He's talked about farmers. But you have to look at the actions, not the words. The actions are lots of people are coming over from different, but the majority are these white South Africans, but not exclusively Afrikaners, also English-speaking South Africans, because the white community is split ethnically along Afrikaners, who are of Dutch, Huguenot, and German descent, and then English speakers. But it's not as simple as that. But generally speaking, say that. Yeah. So the problem is that last week, the week is still going on. It's been that long. This week on a national holiday, a public holiday, when immigration officials simply don't work, and certainly not in uniform, they showed up, and it turned out it was going to be the last day, I think, that they had people processing. They showed up at a leased site where U.S. diplomats were working, processing refugee applicants, and they came in truckloads. Before they got there in the morning, they had people outside taking photographs of license plates and refugee applicants, invading their privacy. And then they went in, they rushed into place, they took photographs, they intimidated people. They took a photograph of an American official working in a diplomatic situation. They took his passport photograph and someone gave it to someone on Twitter, and it's been spread all over the world now. So they doxed a U.S. official. They also invaded the operations of diplomatic, and there was no need for this. All he had to do was call the embassy and say, listen, we understand you brought Kenyans down here. We said they can't work here. We don't want them here. We've gone through the final appeal. No longer possible for them to work here. You need to get them out of here. But instead, on a public holiday with dramatic flair, they made a raid. And of course, the funny thing about it is I broke that story because a lot of these refugees trust me. And it was 7 hours before The Hill broke the story. It was 9 hours before CNN broke the story. And it was 11 hours before, 12 hours before the New York Times broke the story. The next day, on Wednesday, the South African government admitted it was rape. But in the meantime, I've been called a racist and a white supremacist, and I've been attacked left and right just for reporting the news.
Wow. So I remember when the president of South Africa was in the White House in the Oval with Trump, and he was saying, oh, there's no persecution against whites. And then Trump turned to the TV and like played exactly what they were saying about killing whites and killing the Boer and all that stuff. What's going on in the greater situation in South Africa? I mean, it's still pretty bad for these populations, right?
Well, it's pretty bad for all South Africans, to be quite honest. I mean, crime is out of control. The United States has a population of probably, 350 million, if we include the criminal alien invaders who violate our sovereignty and set up shop here. So 350 million people here. South Africa is about 63 million. We have on average 14,000 murders per year. That's horrible. But South Africa has 27,000 murders.
Wow.
Yeah, and no one is safe. They just murdered a key state witness in a national commission that's investigating high-level police corruption called the Mhlanga Commission. He was assassinated, just shot dead in his front yard when he came home from dinner with his kids the other night. And it just goes on and on. But what's going on is that South Africa has passed, ironically, a lot of people had revulsion at the apartheid era, thinking it's unjust to discriminate against people based on their skin color, and they were right. But that's exactly what's been happening under this party. There are now more race-based laws than almost any point other than the National Party. So, for instance, the latest employment equity law has come out and said that businesses cannot have more than 4% of their upper and mid-level management be white men. So it doesn't matter if you're the best, corporate executive in the country, we can't hire you. And here's ironically, a lot of commercial farms, they're enterprises. And so they've got workers. You've got a situation where the number of workers on the farm is so small that the owner of the farm cannot employ his son as a farm manager because he will exceed the racial quotas.
Wow.
We also had a ridiculous situation that goes the other way. A couple of years ago in 2020, there's a sport in South Africa and in the UK and Anglophone countries called netball. It looks like basketball, but you don't dribble. You just have to pass the ball, not run. Girls play it. And actually is a way to make money. These girls play in Australia, New Zealand, UK, and they actually make a living out of it if they're high enough in talent. Well, they had the semifinal in the big event for South Africa, the high school kids coming out or university kids coming out. And this one team won. It was incredible. I watched the end of the game. It was amazing. Netball is kind of fun to watch. And then the whistle blew. The referees walked over the side and they came back. They blew the whistle and the team had to forfeit. Everybody's like, why are they forfeiting? They didn't do anything wrong. Well, here's the problem. Not enough white players were on the court. They had a white player. You have to have at least two of the players be white at all times. And one white player, I think you get like a 10-minute grace period because you can have, because someone has to come out. But we had a white player got injured. And so a black player went in and filled in for her, and she played like 11 minutes or something like that. So they were disqualified. These players, which had advanced to the final, now won't get to the final, show off their talents, and get a chance at a lucrative contract. This is how stupid this stuff is. But as far as people being killed and wiped out, there's been a lot of talk of white genocide. There are degrees and stages to get to genocide. It's not simply wiping people out. I've avoided the term just because it's being used as a political weapon. Unfortunately, when they went to the White House, President Trump showed the receipts for what's going on. But whoever prepped him, I don't think did a very good job. He misspoke. For instance, he talked about these are grave sites. They were clearly not grave sites. They were crosses memorializing dead white farmers who were murdered on their farm. And that is used as a tool and a cudgel against the president by South African politicians for political gain, unfortunately. I think he needs better advisors around him. I'm available if you could give me some time.
I completely agree. That's a problem across multiple issues and sectors and regions. It's really the choice of personnel is awful. Brendy's telling me and others that South Africa is really a laboratory for a lot of the Marxist techniques that are slowly seeping into the West. Not slowly, but are here, but not as bad as in South Africa. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think there's some merit to that argument. First off, the parallels between South Africa and the U.S. are very strong.
Mhm.
For instance, the nature of how the country was formed, populations that came, Europe-based populations came and built democratic societies. So as far as the experiments, the laboratory,
Mhm.
we can go back to a situation that happened over a decade ago at the universities when suddenly there was this movement called fees must fall. In other words, students demanding free tertiary education. They should be allowed to go to university for free. And this led to a whole bunch of things. Then there's Rhodes Must Fall, Rhodes University, which of course is named after Cecil Rhodes, who left an endowment, a massive endowment, but he's considered evil, white, racist, colonialist. So these events took place, and they're very much akin and similar to the Black Lives Matter nonsense that happened in the summer of 2020. Many of the things we're seeing in the United States now have already unfolded in South Africa over the past 15 years. So if people want to make the argument it's a lab for it, it's certainly an example on how to be malcontents and use race as a cudgel to attack people. I remember during the Black Lives Matter nonsense in Missouri at the university, at the dormitory in the public space, which the students pay for, there's a common room, white students who were friendly with the Black Lives Matter idiots, they went into the common room and they said, "No, you're not welcome here. There's only for black students." Yep. And so they just left. I'm like, "Excuse me, you need to correct your attitude here. I paid for this room. You want to do this? Go outside and do it in the street. Otherwise, I'm sitting here." No, it's the same sort of nonsense has percolated across USA. And ironically, Helen Zille, who's a well-known political figure in South Africa, former mayor of Cape Town, the provincial leader of the Western Province, and leader of the Democratic Alliance, which at one time was an opposition party, but now is in collusion with the ANC governing South Africa. I'm not trying to tar Helen Zille. She's a good politician, but she wrote a book about woke. Well, it's ironic because she claims woke came from America. And in theory, the concepts for it did grow up in the 1960s in America, but they died in America. It didn't go anywhere. It had no traction, but it got traction in South Africa 10 to 15 years ago, and it's built up to a crescendo to where it found its way into America under the fraudulent story about George Floyd, the criminal who got himself killed.
What about the theory or the view that apartheid was actually it means keep apart the different tribes who have been warring for a long time, and then when you destroyed that system, that it really opened the door for a lot of violence and problems in South Africa. But obviously there was some racial discrimination, not some, a lot, against the black population. So what do you think of that whole theory?
Well, the theory of apartheid, or apartheid, which literally, as you said, means separateness or separate development, is a theory that's proposed saying that, well, these groups don't really get along very well. They should have their own destiny. In theory, I suppose people can say that's not unreasonable, but you're not going to have a cohesive state if you do that. You can't have a cohesive state. I mean, if Switzerland suddenly decided that, it would break into the French-speaking, the German, the Rhéto-Romanche, and the Italian-speaking, and it wouldn't be a country. So on paper, I suppose it looks good in theory, but I don't know that it works out very well. And that certainly was the case with South Africa. The government created these so-called Bantustans, which were places where traditionally certain groups lived in, but really, it was not an ideal situation. So, for instance, if you looked at Bophuthatswana, it had borders that were not contiguous. You'd have like a 2-mile break, and this is Bophuthatswana, and then someone's farm is in between, and then it starts over again over here. And it was really a mess. And during that time, they relocated about 2.5 million black South Africans, but they also relocated a number of white South Africans who had farms and ranches and property in order to turn that land over to the Bantustans. But in the case of the whites, they compensated them with other land in different parts of the country. So it really upset the settlement patterns. But I don't know that sort of thing works. Now, in the case of South Africa, it's such a diverse country from so many different ethnic groups. But if people want to simplify things to skin color, then you've got 80% black, you've got about 8% white, and you've got about 9% colored, and then you've got about 1% Indian or South Asian descent. But even those groups are widely fragmented, different groups. So you can balkanize a country, and that's essentially what apartheid does, is it balkanizes a country. So I'm not so sure it's a viable concept, but that was the intent. The problem is that they used race as a basis for it rather than ethnicity, even though they used ethnicity to create the groups like Bophuthatswana and Venda, Ciskei, Transkei. These are all based on specific ethnic groups, but it just didn't work. And in the 21st century, it won't work. In fact, I'm not calling for this, but probably a much more viable solution would be for South Africa to break into at least 3 separate entities: the Cape Province, the KwaZulu-Natal Province under the Zulu, and then the rest of the country. Those three areas could be viable economically and politically, but anything other than that probably wouldn't work. They just got to make it. They got to make the 63 million work together. But the party that's ruling South Africa has no interest in what it claims to have: Ubuntu, the spirit of togetherness, or reconciliation, getting past the apartheid era. They just keep hearkening back to 400 years ago. But what they fail to tell the public is that most of the black South Africans who live in South Africa, their ancestors only arrived there 1,300 years ago. Yeah. They were the Nguni-speaking peoples who descended down the Rift Valley of East Africa over the span of a millennium plus, found their way into Southern Africa and displaced the indigenous Khoi and San, or the Bushmen. And they kind of conveniently forget that history.
So I was going to ask you what the way forward for South Africa should be, but you kind of answered that. But what do you think is going to happen, I guess, is the question.
Well, it's going to get ugly before it gets better, because South Africa is being obstinate. They're acting as if it's the 1970s, and they think they're just being total jerks. I'm not to avoid using profanity here. Total jerks is the answer here. They're playing for a domestic audience that's shrinking. So, for instance, the ruling party has gone from nearly 70% of the vote just a decade or so ago to 40% of the people who even bothered to show up. They had a national election last year, and 38% of eligible voters came to the polls. 38%. Of the 38%, they won just 40% of that. That means that if South Africans who go to the polls, we're talking about a small fraction, even support this party. But it's worse because other parties don't get any level of support, but 40%. The problem is that they entered into a coalition, a governing coalition, much like European countries do, which they have no experience in. And the Democratic Alliance, which had been a thorn in their side, a leftist liberal party, but one that appears or claims to be based on the rule of law, they went to a coalition with them. But then the ruling party went behind their back because that was unpopular with their own party, and invited all these other parties in to join this coalition, calling it a grand government of national unity. So 10 parties are in this grouping, and they doled out the ministerial positions. But the ruling party, the ANC, the African National Congress, retained all the levers of power: military, intelligence, justice, foreign policy, finance, everything that matters, they control. They only gave things like, home affairs, which is responsible for things that are broken, to fix to the Democratic Alliance. And other parties got like the sports ministry. So they've acted as if they're still in power, and they've been quite arrogant. They seem to have no realization of what's happening to them, and they continually provoke the United States. During the G20 summit, prior to that, we had all the meetings in the year that built up to that. And of course, U.S. officials, diplomats went there. They doxed U.S. officials previously, identifying their name and information, which is beyond the pale for diplomatic operations. Then at those meetings, which we didn't know until after the G20, for sure, I had heard this from people, but I didn't have enough sources to put it out there. But then the U.S. government came out and explicitly said that during those meetings, when we would discuss a topic, the ANC or the South African government would bring up this topic, and they would shut down discussion. And no, they wouldn't listen to people, and they would say, no, we're not tabling that topic. That's not the way these meetings are supposed to be conducted. It's supposed to be a joint meeting with 20 countries. So the U.S. eventually said, look, we've had enough of this nonsense. And then they said they're not going to come. During the entire G20 summit, the South African government intentionally did one provocation after another to insult and belittle the Americans as if nobody was watching. I was participating in a CNN documentary, which it's just utter nonsense. So they invited me to be in it. Flew me down to Alabama because they really want access to refugees whom I know who have settled in America. And so we got them that access. They interviewed me, but they had no intention of airing it. They never put me in the CNN interview. And I'm fine because I don't want to be part of this disaster. But they told me it was about South Africa leading the G20 and where South Africa is today. That was going to be the documentary. The title of the documentary, with an Irish presenter, was Misinformation, White Genocide. And they went to Arkansas to talk about South Africa, to find a whites-only town in Arkansas to show that white people are all racist and that Trump is wrong. It was utterly ridiculous. And their big coup is getting Earl Musk, who has nothing to do with this whatsoever. He was on there as part of the interview. So, look, it's on that documentary, the foreign minister, Ronald Lamola, is interviewed by Donny O'Sullivan, and he says, United States, Donald Trump is a white supremacist. Now, this is after their ambassador was kicked out of the country earlier this year for saying that Trump was a leader of a global white supremacist movement and America is racist. Then throughout the week, President Ramaphosa was continually seen on camera mocking the USA because Trump said bad things are happening in South Africa. So he and this white guy are sitting in a meeting, and he goes, Mr. President, I know bad things are happening. And Ramaphosa, the president's like, yeah, bad things are happening. Yes, yeah. I mean, if this was published by the Government Information Services on TikTok, this is an intentional insult to President Trump. The fact that the United States hasn't dropped, SEAL Team 6 in there to take Ramaphosa and out shows me that the United States has shown great restraint in this matter. But it's not going to continue after the doxing of our official whose life is now put in jeopardy and raiding a diplomatic site. Of course, they have their propaganda. And this, I guess I got to tell you, this is kind of where I guess I'm a disruptor unintentionally, because I broke the story at least a day before they're ready. I think they want the U.S. government to overreact to the raid. And so I broke the story, and they had to get their story out there quickly. And there's contradictions in their story, misstatements, and you can see that it's all planned ahead of time. Well, this wasn't a diplomatic location. It wasn't on embassy grounds, and these people aren't allowed to be. No, it doesn't matter. You cannot impede diplomats from doing their job if it's legitimate, and that's what's happening. So I think what's going to happen is that we're going to see some sanctions on some senior officials in the government of South Africa for their actions, and maybe some SWIFT banking restrictions and removal from that system. But it's not going to get pretty. 2026 will be a very unhappy year for South Africa, unfortunately.
Wow. Are we still sending aid? Has Trump, has the State Department gone through on that promise to cut all the aid?
All the aid was cut, but there was a resumption of a small amount of money for HIV recently. At least that's what I can see from public reporting. The State Department is very close-lipped about this stuff, in no small measure, I believe, because President Trump has destroyed or taken away the U.S. Agency for National Development, USAID, which had handled much of this. And so now it's falling back on people in the State Department proper to dole this stuff out. And I think there's a shortage of people there that's creating problems, and they're not as I don't want to say not as open, but not as easy to get a hold of to get public comment as they were, say, 8 or 10 months ago.
Sure. Let's talk Africa in general. What should, there's obviously we have competition, great power competition with China, Russia, et cetera, on the continent for minerals, for routes and resources. What should be our policy? Because there's a debate. Do we, we have troops exposed? Should we continue that? I mean, what do you think? Terrorism, all that.
Well, that's a big canister of worms to open up there. But let me try to address it quickly. First off, when it comes to great power competition with China and Africa, we don't have that. Everyone in Washington will tell you that. We capitulated 20 years ago.
Oh, okay.
We're not even fighting that fight. That's what they like to say. But other than putting money into Angola and a couple other places, hundreds of millions of dollars for infrastructure development, we're not really fighting against the Chinese. That's just the mantra, China and Africa. And that's what the think tanks will tell you. But we're not competing. We're not seriously competing in Africa. One of the reasons when I retired from active duty in 2019 that I started consultancy was, to get some trips to Africa, get someone else to pay for that. But I wanted to promote U.S. corporate investment into Africa, because by 2050, Africa will have 2.3 to 2.5 billion people, even with all the out-migration. With that size of continent, based on my own estimates, and also I've done macroeconomics, my own estimates, there'll be at least 900 million people in the consumer class who have excess money after meeting their living needs. It may not be the kind of money you see from Japanese or Germans or Americans, but it'll be money to buy televisions and new bathroom fittings and cars and solar panels and Disney toys and clothes. They'll have disposable income. 900 million. How can you ignore a consumer market of 900 million people? So that's what I'm trying to do, is get people involved there. But the thing about Africa, I've gotten down a rabbit hole there. Get me back. What was your question?
No, just general policy. You have, U.S. military exposure going after terrorists is the claim. What do you think?
So that was, I'm sorry, I got back to my point there. Senior moment to China and Africa issue. That's what it was. So if we want to compete against China and Africa, we need to actually do it. We're not doing that. We've capitulated. We've given up the high ground. We've sat back and complained about them. We're not really doing it. As far as our security operations in Africa, I think we need to be much more circumspect about what we do. We have been involved in the Sahel for a long time. In fact, I'm the officer who set up the Office of Security Cooperation in Niger. Unfortunately, that led years later, to those soldiers being ambushed because the mission, in my view, was being poorly operated and poorly run. They should not have been out like that. But that's criticism that may not be fair to the folks on the ground. But unfortunately, we also have a base in Djibouti, and that's Camp Lemonnier. It's our only base in Africa, despite lies to the contrary. We've poured a lot of time and effort in Africa with mixed results, and I think we need to be more circumspect. I was very much opposed to the U.S. going back into Somalia. When I was in Africa, we went back into Somalia, and I think that was a foolhardy mission, and we've accomplished very little after doing that. Fortunately, we haven't had American casualties, thank goodness, but I'm not sure that's a fool's errand. The Somalis don't want to live in peace. And people that run that area, they want to fight each other to the death, and you can't stop that until they are exhausted, and they're not exhausted yet. But our other policies in Africa, I think we need much more careful about what we're doing. We have long-standing security establishment and relationships with many countries in Africa. They're very fruitful and productive for the Africans and for us. But I think we need to be careful about getting involved in engagements. President Trump is talking about, sending troops into Nigeria. That would be a can of worms we don't want to open. Trust me. Nigeria is a basket case. What people are talking about, Christians being slaughtered, that's been going on for 2 decades, and people have been ignoring it. In addition to that, they have something, they have this pastoralist and herders, cattle farmers, this war between them, because there's not enough land, particularly as the Sahara encroaches into the Sahel and it becomes more desertification in northern Nigeria. You do have all sorts of conflicts, plus massive corruption in the country. It's a country of over 200 million people. it's a real mess. And we've helped there immensely. We've been doing intelligence cooperation with the Nigerian forces for a number of years, which has helped them a lot. We've also worked a deal to sell them Super Tucanos, which are aircraft that were originally built in Brazil, but under license in Florida so that they can actually fight against the terrorists. So we've helped a lot, but I think we need to be very careful. We need smart people advising the president when it comes to this. I'm not claiming there aren't smart people, but Africa is not a priority for any administration, despite what they tell you. Obama put no effort in Africa. The only president in living memory that's actually spent time focusing on Africa to any degree, honestly, is George W. Bush. He put a lot of time and thought in Africa, and with the Millennium Challenge account and with the PEPFAR program and a host of other things. And of course, Congress came up with the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which gave duty-free access. But Africa is a rounding error for the United States, unfortunately for Africans. And the Americans, at some point, we're going to have to wake up 10 or 15 years from now and go, wait a second, why weren't we engaged more successfully in Africa 20 years ago? We made a mistake. But that's where we're headed.
So I was going to ask you about Nigeria as the last question, but I've been told by others that it's not really an attack on Christians. It's just the Christians are being killed as part of a much bigger conflict. Do you agree with that, or is there targeting of Christians?
I disagree wholeheartedly.
Okay.
It's a combination of the two things. It is a case of Christians are caught up in the violence happening by these bandits and terrorists and people looking for money, but they're also intentionally targeted and slaughtered by Muslims. It's been going on for 20 years, long before the current conflict has metastasized and spread across all of northern Nigeria, from the northeast all the way across to the western side. Long before that happened, Christians were intentionally being targeted by Muslim fanatics in northern Nigeria and being slaughtered and killed. The girls taken from the Chibok school, whom Michelle Obama seems to have forgotten about while she's busy raking her millions from Netflix and charging my Netflix account going from $6 a month to $26 a month since Obama got involved. Just saying. Anyway, but Michelle Mybell forgot.
You got to get that veteran discount, man.
They have a veteran discount. I didn't know that. Yeah, I'd like my bicentennial or my 50th anniversary check from the president too as a retiree, but I'm not getting that. The $1,776 would be nice, but no. But seriously, Michelle Obama made big hay out of our girls, the Chibok girls. She completely forgot about them. Many of those girls are still gone. They were Christian Catholic kids who were kidnapped, sold into sexual slavery. Many of them married into Muslims and forced to convert at pain of death. Only a handful, about a third of those girls have ever been recovered, and the trauma they went through is unbelievable. That happens on a repetitive basis. They have been taking Christian schools and attacking them, enslaving the women as wives, passing them around as sex slaves, selling them off in the black market to places. They go end up in the Middle East and places like that as sex slaves. And they've been enslaving the boys from these schools or forcing them to convert and become child soldiers. It's a combination of things. But to claim falsely that it's just they're caught up in the violence is utter nonsense. We have the evidence. We've seen this going on for years. And look, you can say what you want about Christians. You can attack Christians. It's cool. Christians are evil, terrible people, horrible people. They led the Crusades to recapture the Holy Land from the people who invaded it. But that's another story. But never mind the truth. Since I was a kid in the late 70s, early 80s, I noticed a trend that I didn't really pay much attention to. But it became cool to start criticizing Christians. And it started with evangelicals, with Jim and Tammy Faye and others. And they went on from there. And then suddenly you could say anything you want about a Christian, but gosh forbid you find a jihadist who actually says they want to murder Christians because of Christians. You're an Islamophobe. Now, there's a real problem with the world today. The world's upset. There's nothing wrong with Christianity, and there's nothing wrong with Islam. There is a problem with religious fanatics. And calling a religious fanatic, there's nothing wrong with that. And we should do that.
I agree. We got a situation in Armenia where the evangelicals, in my opinion, are really on the wrong side. While they're trying to overrun the oldest Christian cathedral in the world, and they're just sitting by, having prayer breakfast with the leader who's doing it. It's amazing. Colonel, thank you. I want to have you back down the road. I found a new Africa expert. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Merry Christmas to you as we celebrate the birth of the Christ child. And coincidentally, for me, it's always a special day, but not so great when I was a kid because it's the anniversary of my birth date. I was born on Christmas Day.
Oh, fantastic. Merry Christmas. And I forgot to say, tell people where they can follow you. I know you have a pretty active YouTube presence.
I do. That's probably the best place to follow me. I have a Substack, but I just write there occasionally. I'm published in newspapers, but telling you where to go, you'd have to find which newspaper and which date. The easiest way to find me is on my main YouTube channel, which is at Colonel Chris Wyatt, just the @ symbol, Colonel Chris Wyatt. I am shadow banned frequently, and it's difficult. It's an uphill struggle, but I do currently have about 118,000 subscribers on there. And if you look at the stats, I probably, for those YouTubers or content creators that cover South Africa, I'm probably the top or one of the top two consistently, even though I'm an American living in Pennsylvania. But I cover not just South Africa, I cover all of Africa. I have a unique news program. It's every day, 7 days a week, unless I'm traveling, even holidays, Christmas Day, I'll be working 365 days a year because I love what I'm doing. And I start with the news. I read the news every day in English, German, French, Afrikaans, and then I analyze the news. And I start with South Africa, work around Africa, hit the hot spots like Myanmar and places people aren't talking about, and big events that break. Then I come back and finish up with U.S. news. That's my final subject. Then I talk to my audience. I do prepared videos, but at Colonel Chris Wyatt is the main place you find me. Once you find me there, you can find me everywhere because you just join the chat and people tell you where to find my stuff.
Well, definitely going to have you back, and I feel your pain on the shadow banning. We were deplatformed heavily, lost 500,000 followers. We're rebuilding, but anyway, thank you, Colonel. We'll have you back.
My pleasure. Merry Christmas,
Take
guys.
care. Merry Christmas. The bird flu is circulating. We're getting more and more press, more fear mongering, more warnings about this. First, let's start with that. What say you on?
Well, what I say is it specifically is not circulating. It's in animals. There's one human, maybe two transmissions, no human-to-human transmission. And stand by, everybody. If there is some sort of sudden human-to-human transmission, you should immediately be suspicious that gain of function was involved with that. Just the fact that they're taking an animal virus and going nuts on it in the press and talking about it all the time, that to me leads me to believe that they have concerns that somebody is doing something with that virus, because this would not happen naturally, in my opinion.
Our world is changing rapidly. Many crucial systems we depend upon are collapsing. And the most important system that is failing is the food supply.
Mr. President, this Council is more than aware of the multiple challenges and threats the world is facing today. But the threat of famine, people starving slowly to death, must be a red line.
These food prices are going to keep going up and up, and they're going to keep feeding excuse after excuse, narrative after narrative. Yeah, so you're going to have to get off that treadmill and start getting more autonomous with your own food growing.
You want to make sure that you can eat, because frankly, food is the biggest issue as we are going through these transitions.
But amidst the chaos, there is a path to resilience. Marjorie Wildcraft is the female leader of the survival and preparedness movement. Marjorie has taught millions of people how to grow an abundance of food in a grid-down situation, even if you have no experience, are older, or out of shape.
I've spent decades finding the fastest, easiest, and funnest ways for the average person to be able to grow a lot of food. I've created a step-by-step process that's so simple that even kids to elders have been using it in order to grow a lot of their own food. And you can too, even if you have no experience, you're older, or you're out of shape.
Growing your own food is like printing your own money. Get started today.
Welcome back to the SCIF. I wanted to say Merry Christmas to all. I hope you have a big holiday planned. We have family coming in. We're going to do a show tomorrow, but Wednesday and Friday we will be putting up reruns, best of. So expect that. Then we'll be back the following week. We've got David Cross coming on here in a second. I just wanted to finish talking about this story. Viktor Orban saying if you're going to freeze Russian assets to fund the Ukraine war for 2 years, so technically the EU has loaned, I think, 90-something billion euros to Ukraine for the next 2 years, but they're collateralizing it essentially against the frozen Russian assets of 300 billion approximately. So Orban is saying if you touch those assets, you're going to have a global war. maybe again, that's the reason for doing that, is they want a war, they want a tripwire, they're trying to get U.S. forces in there. So far, Trump has resisted that. We hope that continues. Our point is we need to focus on the U.S. United States of America, and we need to stop focusing on Europe because they're putting people in jail for Facebook posts. So I think the Trump administration is on the right track to slowly draw down out of Europe and rebuild our domestic protections. But we don't want to get drawn into this war. So we're going to continue talking about that because it's extremely important. We talked about the Armenian Christians at Etchmiadzin yesterday, but the globalist government of Nikol Pashinyan is trying to take over the oldest Christian cathedral in the world. And we played the video of them doing that. You can see this on CDM right there. The police are in bed with the government, and they were not successful due to the large crowd of parishioners which came in and blocked them from taking over the cathedral. And it's like the Vatican City there at Etchmiadzin outside of Yerevan, the capital for the Armenian Apostolic Church. And so, but sources on the ground are telling us that they'll keep trying until they do it, and they have overwhelming force. So eventually, the Christian parishioners will be blocked. But the other thing they're doing is they're saying the Trump administration has given them the green light. We don't have any confirmation of that, but we are going to continue to talk about what's happening. And we talked about Tom Barrack's comments in Syria, not mentioning the Christians as part of the country, which I find pretty shocking. Last but not least, actually not last, but this is an article on CDM, a letter by Jeffrey Sachs, who's the Columbia professor, open letter to German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, saying, you're pushing for a war, and this is not the way forward for humanity. But again, Merz, Macron, Zelensky, Starmer, they're all working for somebody else. They're all just actors in a play to get the world into World War III. If you notice a pattern, World War I, World War II, World War III, the internet has brought awareness, even though this is why they're trying to censor everybody, because they can't do these cyclical wars anymore without us rising up and knowing about it and connecting and stopping it. So that's why they're pushing censorship and, again, pushing the war to get rid of us pesky Christians in Western civilization so they can control a world of slaves, in my opinion. Also, there's another story. I'll just bring this one out. This is on SOFX. U.S. forces returned to Ecuador for counter-narcotics mission. This has been going on for a long time. The U.S. Air Force is down there. It's probably AFSOC assets along with other white soft going after the drug mission there. We're going to stay on this story. We'll put it on armedforces.press, but I think that's important, and you need to know about it. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with David Cross, and we'll get into some of the financial issues today. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Watching my friends gain more and more weight, and then eventually I got to tell you, this is a little dark, but bad diet literally killed my whole crew.
Wow.
Diabetes, a stroke, I mean, all kinds of stuff. It's like, you had a stroke? You're not even 50 years old. You guys got to quit eating this stuff. Your body knows what's what. You're not conscious of this. But that's why people will go to the refrigerator and they'll grab this and that and the other and put together this outrageously elaborate combination of foods. Your body's trying to reach balance. Unbeknownst to us, our bodies are always trying to reach homeostasis. You can't eat all of this stuff and expect to live a long time. And one thing led to another, and I went, forget this. We're going to make our own product. So we partnered with one of the world's top 3 biochemists where nutrition specific study is concerned. I said, all I want is the best nutritional and immune support product in the world. So we mixed it in yogurt. It's a powder. I got a bag of it here. I keep one on the console all the time, just so I can show people.
Yeah.
And it's a powder. Now, this is not candy. This is hardcore nutrition. And sugar is an enemy. And most people do not know that the reason these bellies are showing up on people all over the place, your body makes fat to store the toxins it can't get rid of. So it just puts them over here. But I can tell you this, you take this for 30 days and then lay off of it for 2 or 3 days, and you'll go, good grief, give me some more. Skin, nails, hair growing back, cut yourself and it heals in half the time.
I'm David Cross, and you may know me from my election integrity work, but I also own U.S. Asset Management, an investment advisory practice. I've been an advisor for nearly 30 years, and one of the questions I get asked most frequently is, do I have enough money relative to other people my age? And while that's an interesting question, it's also the wrong question. The right question is do you have enough money to sustain your lifestyle for the rest of your life? This is a question you should know the answer to. This is what we do. Check us out at us-am.com and look for our big, proud American Eagle logo.
We have foot, slog, 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 slogging over Africa. Foot, 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 slogging over Africa. Boot, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. 7, 6, 11.
Welcome back to the SCIF. Speaking of David Cross, we're about to have him on. But if you have an issue with your finances, you know, there's all kind of issues that this kind of thing may come up. The big one is retirement. If you need to plan for retirement, make sure you got enough money to survive and thrive through your retirement. Talk to David. Also, divorce is a big one. Sale of a business, death in the family. All these issues create estate issues, and David is the guy to go to. And I can tell you, we've had really great feedback from people who have worked with him. We only recommend people here at CDM that are of high quality and of high character, and David fits that bill exactly. So go to US Asset Management and talk with him and connect with him. It's just an easy conversation, and you can do that at us-am.com, usassetmanagement.com. All right, I'm going to bring in Mr. Cross. I see him in the green room. David, how you doing, man?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
Oh, all good. So a lot going on in Georgia. Let's start there. What do you hear with Fannie and all this? I mean, you were the former in the former leadership of the GOP, but what's going on there?
All right, so there was a political stunt that happened on Wednesday when Fannie was called in by the Senate committee, and Greg Dolezal and some other folks who were trying to make a name for themselves brought her in, and they were hoping to get her on some clips where they could use this for their campaigns. And unfortunately, I think she came in like a thug,
like a rapper. She had like a white fur on and all this kind of stuff.
Dude, she had the material pre-written, and she roasted them. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
And it was embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for these guys. I mean, you do not invite an angry black woman into your Senate chambers and try to roast her with no preparation and no material. They were winging it, and they got blasted to Mars.
Wow. So how did the Georgia public respond to that?
Well, the funny thing is that there were a bunch of people out there going, "Yay, we finally got Fannie." I'm like, "Yeah, you and I weren't watching the same presentation because she smoked them." So it was a challenge, kind of watching that. I was just like, oh, I feel really bad for them.
So who's going to run for governor and Senate? What's your thoughts?
I don't think that Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to run. I think she's just kind of fed up with politics. And as far as governor goes, I'm really concerned about Burt Jones. There's another ad was dropped last night. It hit my text, last night, and it's smoking Burt Jones again. And listen, I like Burt Jones. He's a nice guy, but he's getting blasted by whoever is behind the money and the message on this thing. And I think that Brian Kemp is behind it. It's too well organized. The information is something that really only political insiders would know, and they're roasting him. And he's got to come out stronger, or else I'm concerned that he's going to end up being like a crushed aluminum can by February.
So obviously Kemp is pushing Derek Dooley, right? This guy came from nowhere, has no political experience for the U.S. Senate.
Well, so Dooley's running for Senate. As far as governor goes, my understanding is that is that Kemp is behind Carr.
I see.
And I think what's going to happen is with what happened with the state election board, what was it, last week or the week before, where we got this big, I can't say judgment, but we've got this big recommended judgment against Fulton County. It's going to end up being twice the size because they're missing twice the tabulator tapes. They're missing all the tabulator tapes that we stipulated, plus the zero tapes. So it'll end up being like a $1.5 million fine. And then there's going to be more
ballots supposedly in the warehouse yet.
Yeah. And I think what's going to happen is Chris Carr is going to have an opportunity to really go out and make a name for himself. And if he's smart, he'll stay in office. He won't drop out. There's concern that he might drop out. If Chris Carr does drop out of being attorney general, then that leaves the door open for the governor to appoint somebody else. And if he does that, he'll probably appoint Josh McCoon, which would be terrible.
As attorney general?
Yeah, as attorney general. So it's just, Josh, unfortunately, is in my opinion, he lacks talent and drive and understanding. He's a political animal. He really just needs to stick to being a politician and a so-so lawyer. But I don't think he is attorney general material.
I would no.
But the thing is what people need to understand is that, if you ask me, like last night, somebody asked me and said, "Who do you think Kemp is for?" And I said, "Well, Kemp is for Kemp."
Yeah,
right? That's issue number one. And then beyond that, you need to look at like who lines Kemp's pockets the most. So,
and what is Kemp's future? What does Kemp want? Does he want to be president? What is
here's the thing. I don't think he has a snowball's chance in hell of becoming president of the United States. He might think he does. Marty might think he does, but they are in fantasy land. But I think he would be totally happy with being kingmaker of Georgia for the rest of his days.
Wow. Running that $100 million pot of money or whatever it is.
I think it's 300. It's over 300 million now. And the thing is it's all untrackable. So
yeah.
you can be the king when people give you unlimited buckets of money.
Wow. Speaking of money, what's going on in the financial markets, man? A lot of turbulence, a lot of pundits saying one way or the other. What say you? Well, I know you got to give your disclaimer. So
yeah. So, that's right. I gotta pull up my disclaimer. So, what is my disclaimer? So, all right. So my advice is general. In nature, it's not meant to be. It's not meant to be recommendations for anybody. Seek your own advice from your own financial advisor, and from there, I own a company called US Asset Management. We're affiliated with Advisory Services Network. We're a member of their group, and you can look us up at us-am.com. All right. So what's happening with the market right now? For the last couple of years, I think when we first started these discussions, I was kind of putting the message out there that, people are accustomed to thinking of stock markets of being sometimes volatile. And when we have a crash, the crash can only go down. And I put it out there a couple of years ago with you guys that in an economy where the government is printing unlimited amounts of money, you can sometimes get a crash up in assets. And that's exactly what we've seen happen. The price of silver has gone from, $25, $28 an ounce like last year to it just hit, I think, 66 or 67.
Wow.
It's
going to
not
pop 70. Holy shit.
It's not showing any signs of slowing down. Here's the mind bender though for you. If from the time that President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, the money supply is up about 6,000%. The price of silver, I think, is up about 2,500%. The price of gold is up roughly about the same. So they over time, they tend to generally track each other. And so there's the potential that we could see more of this. So this crashing up is kind of what's going on. And, and that's not to say that you can't see price adjustments in stocks, particularly in artificial intelligence, because things are kind of getting a little bit overblown there. But you know what? There's as Jim Cramer says over on CNBC, there's always a bull market somewhere. So we could see a resurgence of, small companies, international companies, dividend paying stocks, and our job is just to simply look for those signals.
So crypto, is there any value there? I mean, XRP is down 50%, and Bitcoin's not that much, but I mean, obviously there was huge speculation going on there and institutional buying, which drove it up. But what are your thoughts on the crypto sector? I know that's not really your favorite, but what do you think?
Well, listen, I mean, I've been studying this stuff an awful lot, and here's the thing: out of all the crypto assets that are out there, to my mind, Bitcoin is really the only one that's not. It can't be. You can't print limited more Bitcoin. Okay, more XRP, can be created. More Ethereum can be created. Things like that. That's not the case with with Bitcoin. And and one of the reasons why Bitcoin has been adopted is because if you happen to be traveling, over in the Middle East somewhere, and you say, "Hey, Dave, I need for you to send me $1,000." All right. I can send you $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, and you can get it within a couple of minutes, and it will spend there just as easily, as it does here, right? If you say, "Hey, I need for you to send me $1,000 worth of gold," you know what? It's gonna, we're gonna have shipping costs. We're gonna, when you get it, you're gonna have to test it and make sure that it's real. It's, it has some impediments,
sure,
but Bitcoin doesn't face that.
Wow, where do you see value? I mean, besides, you mentioned precious metals, but what else? What else has really caught your eye lately?
We've been working on a new model where we've had some clients that have come to us that have said, "I need cash flow. I can't just be dependent upon capital gains," and so we've recently rolled out a new portfolio that's dividend centric. It's yielding north of 5%. In dividends. I think it's also got some excellent growth characteristics to it also. We're trying to find companies that have got solid balance sheets, that pay out less in dividends than what they earn, and they have a history of paying dividends and raising those dividends over time. So I'm pretty excited about the possibilities there. But I mean, the whole point right now is stay diversified. And really the only thing that I don't like a lot is bonds. Because I feel like bonds lose money over time. And then outside of that, the greatest risk that we face right now sounds a little bit esoteric, but the Japanese are raising interest rates right now. And for the longest time, they had interest rates, at zero or negative. And that enables something called the yen carry trade, where you can borrow money and you can buy stock someplace else. And the problem is that when they start raising interest rates, then that situation becomes less profitable, and you can actually start to lose money on that. And if that happens, if it continues, if the Japanese continue raising interest rates, there's a possibility you could see an unwind, of that, which means that an unwind is a fancy word for people selling stocks. So
the days of the goal when I was in the business back in the day is $1 million in muni bonds paying 5% tax free. That's kind of gone, right?
That was the gold standard. But the thing is that was at a time when we had stable money. We don't have stable money. We have fiat money. I mean, I've got like I've got like a roll of $50 up here. I use them. What you can see is that they're not silver. They've got like these bands of of copper in them. They're made out of something called cupro, which is nickel and copper. It's slag. It's shiny slag that has no value. So fiat money is like melting ice, and I try to have as little of my money in cash as possible.
So last question, and Merry Christmas, by the way. But what any political future for David Cross? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I will. So
my wife wants me to say no, because she has been the election widow for a long time. And here's the thing, I can't say no, because I went to a DeKalb County event last night, their Christmas party. Steve Gooch was there. I had a lot of questions from a lot of people. I had a lot of people thanking me for all the work that that I've done and the success that we had with the state election board. And I've got some people that are saying, "Why aren't you running?" And what I'm telling them is, I'm not running because the system is still rigged. If I ran, I would put a huge amount of time, effort, energy, and money, into running. And I don't feel like it's a fair ball field. I feel like the system is still rigged and riggable. And I'm not going to participate in something like that because all it does is put me at risk.
Totally get it, man. Well, keep us advised, and thank you for coming on, man. Merry Christmas, and Merry Christmas to your
pleasure.
family.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Hope to see you soon. Take care, my friend.
You will. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.
Well, in the case of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, these are two medications that have been FDA approved for use in humans for decades. They are very, very inexpensive. Interestingly, available over the counter in almost every other country other than the US and Canada. You can just walk into a pharmacy and buy them like we buy Tylenol in much of the world because they're that safe. And we've known for decades that ivermectin has very strong antiviral properties. It has anti-inflammatory properties, and both ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are what we call zinc ionophores. They help to move zinc from the bloodstream into the cell, which is where it needs to be in order to fight off a virus. So lots of application for these, and we have every reason to believe that those drugs also will likely have some efficacy against H5N1 or a number of other respiratory viruses that we may meet down the road.
If you haven't noticed, gold has reached a new high, all-time highs actually, and keeps going up every day. Why is that? It's because precious metals are a long-time historical store of value. And if you own a portfolio and you have assets in the fiat currencies, i.e. stocks, bonds, cash, or whatever, you're vulnerable to hyperinflation, which is coming as our debt explodes another trillion every 90 days. It's really scary. So how do you protect yourself? Go to Advisor Metals. If you look on any of our cdm.press sites, about halfway down, there's an ad for Advisor Metals. Click on it, fill out the form for your contact info, and Ira Bishotsky will contact you and talk to you. It's an easy conversation. There's no sales pitch. He's completely verified by us. He has a regulatory background we've checked into. We've checked with his bankers. We've checked with his IRA custodians for metals, and we can highly recommend Advisor Metals and IRA. So go to Advisor Metals. If you call them directly, tell them we sent you at CDM, and he'll definitely take care of you. But protect your portfolio because you really need to. It's coming. Thank you. Welcome back to the SCIF. I want to give you a Christmas gift idea. If you order now, maybe depending on the provider, you can get it, or get it for New Year's. My book, Paying the Price, The Untold Story of the Iranian Resistance. I'll just read you a couple things off the back. Todd Wood has taken one of the most successful disinformation operations of the Iranian regime, and in doing so, exposed the Washington, D.C. press corps, which has failed the MEK and the people of Iran. For too long, the Iranian people have fought the regime mostly on their own and at great cost. This important book comes at a critical time for the opposition, which is growing from strength to strength, even as the streets across the country run with their blood. That's from Laura Logan, award-winning journalist and former 60 Minutes correspondent. And then I have those who have worn a uniform understand a struggle for the death, or to the death for freedom. For us that have served in battle, we know soldiers historically must come to the sound of the trumpet. Paying the price is one of those struggles, largely unknown to many. This story by Todd Wood is at once emotional, disturbing, and yet uplifting as we see those yearning to throw off the yoke of totalitarianism give their all. Realizing there is no substitute for victory in seeking freedom, a must read. That's from General Paul Vallely, chairman of the Stand Up America Foundation, U.S. Army, retired Major General. So Paying the Price, you can find it anywhere. Great for that person who loves history, geopolitics, understanding the world. I guarantee you, it will be something they wouldn't expect or know about in advance. And the issue, most people have no idea what's going on there, and it will be enlightening. So with that, that's our show for today. We'll be back to Monday. Who do we have Monday? I don't know if I know we have Pete Blaber coming on next week, and some other guests, but we're still putting the show together. But anyway, we'll be back. Please follow us on social media, CDM_press. and at L. Todd Wood on X, CDM1 on Rumble, CDM on YouTube. Please subscribe on all of those if you haven't yet, because we need to grow our numbers. Oh, sign up for our no ad subscriptions. Really need you to do this. Oh, that's the wrong one. I'm sorry. Let me go to the right one. Really need you to do this and go to my.cdm.press and sign up for our no ad subscriptions. You get access to all of our content, an amazing curation of news from all over the world with no advertisements popping up. It's $10 a month or $100 a year. Pay the $100, get it out of the way, and enjoy a year's worth of outstanding content with no advertisements. So with that, we'll be back Monday. Thank you for joining us today, and tell people about the show, and Merry Christmas. Have a great holiday. We'll be back Monday.